What's your I told you so moment? Since I was 14, my throat got itchy when I ate apples. I told my mom, but she thought I just didn't want to eat apples and forced me to eat them. Went to the doctor's office and got a test for allergies. Turns out, I'm allergic to apples, peaches, and many other fruits. Anytime I'm asked to give an expected time to deliver on a project, give an honest assessment, and then told that estimate seems too large and the bosses give a much shorter time frame, my original estimation is nearly always the more accurate of the two. Why ask questions you don't want to know the answer to anyway? My newborn baby was projectile vomiting after every feeding. I took her to the doctor several times. Always ended up being sent away with suggestions to try a different formula. I tried like 4 different ones. No change. The 4th or 5th visit, they sent me away again with the same recommendation, even though I pleaded with them to figure out what was wrong with my baby. I left the office and drove to the emergency room instead. She ended up having emergency surgery that day. The surgeon said she would have starved to death or maybe dehydrated had she gone much longer without the surgery. I gave the doctors in that office a piece of my mind. Lawyer here. Fired a partner who I found some real irregularities in their spending habits versus what they were making. After he couldn't provide a good answer to where it came from, other partner left and started a new firm with them because they disagreed with my decision and refused to look at the evidence. Turns out he stole $500k of a client's money, got disbarred, and is now facing prison time. I told her to look at the evidence and she didn't listen. My sister and I were out sledding when we were kids at this place with a really steep hill. I had unknowingly gone down a sled path that had a jump in it, and when I landed it really hurt my back. So when I got back up to the top of the hill I told my sister don't go that way, the jump really hurts. She called me a baby and didn't believe me that it really hurt, so she decided she would go down that path on her sled. Well, she hit the jump and didn't get back up. Turns out she fell so hard she had broken her leg. When we finally got her back up the hill and to the car, I got to tell her I told you so. I work at a US Navy shipyard. My worst I told you so moment was when a submarine had multiple issues with sanitation collection tanks and the piping that led from the showers and toilets to the sanitation collection tanks. Documented and pointed out the same problems over a 12-week period. Supervisors and the tank area manager didn't give a damn and pointedly ignored my reports. Undocking day was approaching and the captain of the sub wanted the boat out on time. So they moved up the tank closure schedule. So tank closing protocol requires several signals, one from a qualified civilian inspector, one from a qualified Navy hull technician sailor, and one from a qualified Navy engineering officer. That tank in question failed all 3 concurrent inspections. Undocking got pushed back by 30 days until all problems found were corrected. Daily operations estimated costs were north of $10,000 a day. Factor in the mandatory overtime and rework required, and we were looking at maybe triple the daily cost. This is just people's pay. I didn't get to see the material cost overrun, but I know for a fact that a lot of the materials got shipped in or fabricated in-house overnight. Needless to say, a lot of people on general schedule pay got chewed out by the then Shipyard going private. My best friend started dating my ex-wife 10 years after the divorce and he checked if a take issue, even though he didn't need to anyway. When we divorced it was because she was cheating on me while I was in Afghanistan. He goes out of state for work and told me she started acting off, not answering calls, quick to hang up, starting fights when he's home, or going to parties rather than spend time with him. I pointed out this is what she did to me almost exactly and stated that if he confronts her on her shit she will probably without provocation accuse him of cheating, and more to the point most likely because she is actively cheating. 30-minute monologue of how she's grown up and she's not that person now, she's just used to not having to answer to others or having a real relationship in year. 3 hours later he calls because he went to pick up some weed and there she is blowing the cellar. Was picking beans with my sister and mom. To this day I still don't know why the fence was electric, but it was. I touched it, and I got zapped. It wasn't too bad but it hurt. I jumped away, and my sister saw me. I said that it was an electric fence. Of course she just thought I was pranking her. I was trying to tell her the whole time we picked beans, but she didn't believe me. Right at the end she touched the fence and she didn't see it coming at all. Her face was just like, oh, she loved the car ride home. I told you, idiot. Had a weirdly dark freckle, the color of chocolate. I showed spouse and he called me a hypochondriac, and if I go to a doctor, I'd be wasting their time. I went to the dermatologist. It was melanoma. I spent months telling my mother to get a dash camera. I even sent her a link to a cheap one on Amazon, so she would at bare minimum have something. Sometime later she got a new car, and in less than a week she got into an accident. She was fine. But because she couldn't prove that the other driver was at fault, their insurance company would only pay for some of the damage. Car was totaled. The worst part is that she still hasn't gotten a damn camera. In high school I was at a party where everyone was getting drunk. I had come with 2 friends, and near the end of the night this one guy there was losing everyone into his van to get late night food. He swore he was not drunk and there were so many people in his car, including the 2 people I came with. It was not a battle I was going to win, but it seemed like an obviously dumb situation. Bunch of underage kids packed into a van driving around in the suburbs at 1 in the morning. I told my friends that this wasn't a good idea and they need to get out of the van and come back gone with me. My house was within walking distance. They acted like I was a party pooper for a second, but then they got out. Next day I find out the guy driving ran a red light and got boned by a truck. The one kid in the back almost died and everyone got banged up. The friends I pulled out of the van were in the back seat along with him. Not saying I saved their lives, but I really may have saved their lives. My partner and I were broke and struggling to make ends meet, but we always kept money in the budget for fun or tequila at nights. One night we decided to get fish and chips. My partner had never ordered from that particular place before, but it was my favorite, so he knew it'd be good. We don't have a lot of money to spare, so I know we had to order smart. We'll only order what we need. We start driving, and I'm about to call, and my partner tells me he wants to order 10 worth of chips. For those of you who don't know how much that is, a scoop of chips is usually about 2-3. I tried to tell him that it was a ridiculous order, and that this particular fish and chip shop was very generous with their portions, which is why it was one of my favorites. He was adamant about 10 chips, and that he was so hungry that it's not like any would be wasted. We had a mini argument in the car, and I finally gave up and said, fine, order your chips, but you had better eat them all. We get to the fish and chip shop and we go to the counter to pay, and the old fellow who runs the shop comes over to serve us. We tell him what order we're here to collect. That order is yours. He goes. I start to shake my head and smile. Yes. My partner replies. And it's just for you too. The old man asks, looking concerned. Ah. Yes. At this point I start laughing. I tried to tell him. We both laugh and my partner realizes his mistake when the old guy pulls out 2 huge parcels of chips. One of those alone would have fed a full family. We all laughed a little hearts out, thanked the man, and went home to eat our fish and chips. And no, he didn't eat them all. We didn't even get through the first parcel. Now whenever we need the other person to trust our judgment on something, we say 10 chips, and the other person will always relent. It still cracks me up every time I think about his face when the old man gave us our order. I once owned a dog who was very stubborn and independent. She lived a feral life in the mountains as a young pup, and I feel like that played a role. She felt more like a roommate than a pet. She was having heart trouble when she got older, so she had to get a chest scan at the vet. These 2 men came out to get her, so I gave them a heads up that she would absolutely dislike being flipped on her back and held there for the scan. Flipping a dog on its back is putting it in a pretty submissive position. One of the guys interrupted me and basically said they were professionals and I had to just let them work. They snapped a muzzle on her and took her to the back. A few seconds pass, Then I hear a crash and a few yells. One of the guys who took her comes out and sheepishly asks for my help. It turns out, as soon as they flipped her on her back, she kicked out of their arms, unclipped her muzzle, removed it with her front paws, then made a mad dash for freedom. I caught her roaming around the back of the vet's office, and she was perfectly well behaved while I held her for the scan. I felt bad for two guys she escaped from, but I had tried to warn them. Someone started talking about a bottle of Newman's Own salad dressing while at dinner with my family, and I said something like, "I'm pretty sure that was started by the actor race car driver Paul Newman." To which one of my siblings replied, "No, it was someone else." I grabbed the bottle and turned it around and started reading the label out loud. The first sentence was, "Paul Newman's career was acting, but his passion was auto racing." I stopped reading after that. This dumb asshole woman wouldn't leave the llamas at our petting zoo alone, even after I warned her. Eventually they had enough and spit all over her. Green goopy spit from head to torso. She threw up a bunch and I laughed until I smelled it, and then I was retching too. This is more of a I told myself so, but anyway, when I applied to medical school, one of the application essays had a prompt that asked us what we would do if we did not get into medical school. I thought I would take a risk, since it was a reach school and I wanted to stand out. I kept thinking it wasn't worth it, and that I should just write a normal essay, but for some reason just went with the riskier option. I wrote that I would go to law school and become a lawyer specializing in prosecuting medical malpractice. I ended up getting an interview and had a good laugh about it with one of the interviewers. Did not get into that medical school. Helping a former friend do some renovations in a house he had just purchased. I had better than half a clue what I was doing, and my other friend who was with us definitely knew what she was doing. But the guy who owned the house hardly knew which end of the hammer to grip. We get down to the foundation walls and there is an almost brand new 4x4 post running from floor to ceiling that he thought was ugly. I tried to explain to him that it was clearly load bearing, and my friend chimed in that it was obviously there for a reason. But his reply was something to the effect of girls being hysterical and mocking us for thinking the ceiling was going to fall down. I literally backed away from the situation, and when he took a maul to the beam and knocked it loose, I watched the ceiling drop. He still thought I was overreacting until we got upstairs and saw the 3 gap between the floor and baseboards along the front wall of the house. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.